So I went to go read those allegations because somebody, I asked for evidence because I'm a big evidence person. So, let me read it myself, and I will weigh in what I think of that opinion. And so one of them finally posted something I could read, and it was an article from back at the time of 2011 maybe. And in it they say, all it said was Beau Biden stands by the judge's ruling for DuPont Air sex case, right? Now, standing by a case and determining it are two totally different things. The attorney general doesn't have the power in any way, shape, or form to lay down sentencing. They can make a suggestion, as can the defense,
Hmm.
to the judge, but it's up to the judge ultimately. So the allegations that people have made that were based on articles like that, where of course they need to understand how law works. If you're an attorney general in a state and you're trying a case in your state, that judge that's assigned to your case, you're probably going to have to deal with that judge again as
Hmm.
attorney general. You guys have to work together because you're in the judicial system on behalf of the state. There's only X amount of judges. It's a small state. At the time, less than 1 million people live there. So, you know, this is important for the just how the judicial system works. You have to have good relations with the judges like you would with the bailiff and the magistrates. These are people you're going to work with. So, yes, he's going to be like, I support what the judge said. Naturally, he would. What good
Hmm.
is it going to do to go against this woman um, when you don't have any determination in the first place? You can't decide that. That's her job. That's why she's a judge.
Yeah.
And so I've ruled that out as any sort of excuse to say he was a bad guy. He didn't throw the case because he couldn't have thrown the case. It's not up to him at that point.
Yeah.
It's in the judge's
I
hand.
I get the criticism too because I want to see this guy put away forever, and it's hard to see
No,
the
he didn't get
sentencing.
any prison time
He
though.
didn't get
No.
any prison time. It's ridiculous. That's very upsetting. But it's also, I believe, what Bo was saying too is, yeah, it was just impossible to get these predators convicted because of it being a child victim. Uh, it's really hard to digest that, and it's also there's also sketchy stuff. I believe he was supposed to go to. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe this predator, the DuPont guy, was supposed to go to Massachusetts for some type of rehabilitation, but
It didn't go. Yeah.
because he's not allowed to travel to a different state because of him being a predator. It's almost like they knew none of this would go through. So all that's really shady to me, for sure.
It's very shady, but again, that the sentencing was out of both hands.
Right,
And his ability to sway that to the judge would have been judicial misconduct and they would have thrown the case out.
right.
So people have to understand that, like, yeah, if he would have like forced the judge somehow through some sort of coercion to change what her sentencing ruling would have been to what Bo demanded, that's grounds for an acquittal. And the guy would have got away scot free. But because he's like, okay, we're going to get him on, I think it was rape 4, which is still a felony,
Yeah.
which still means the guy had to plead guilty to raping his own daughter. And that's huge because that puts him on the the pedophile list and
Hmm.
registries,
Hmm.
and that will keep him from being hired in certain places and other children not know. Like, people will know this guy at the very least they know that, and at the very least he's a felon. And I think that's a pretty pretty big accomplishment for all your witness was 1 3-year-old girl who's extremely traumatized. You're not working with a lot, and I think that he did the best he could. And I think that judge went light because of the fear she had for her life, which I think was apparent the moment she hired private security to
Yeah.
cover her for
I
that
mean,
case. Because
when,
if you put him in for 20 years or whatever, you're already getting a big target on your back
yeah,
just by proceeding with the case, and
when
she knew that.
when I heard you talk about the judge and these death threats, it made me think there was an Epstein judge a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know if you remember the story. She was handling one of the cases, and an assassin showed up to her door and murdered her son.
I remember
It
that.
was He was
I
dressed like
remember.
FedEx. Like it's insane. It's giving me chills thinking about that because I remember like how terrifying that is. And like they do these tactics. So I understand that, and it says a lot about Bo, although I don't know anything really outside of this story with him and what I've heard, Joe manufacture. I appreciate what he's done, and it says a lot that he went after these people, and that's great. It also says a lot about the power of the DuPont family and the power that they can levy in their own state to get these sweet deals, which again then reminds me of the Epstein deal that he got in prison. He got a nice little deal in prison and still came out and was friends with princes and rich people like Bill Gates afterwards, which is insane to me. But yeah, it is really weird. So then that's all happening. This is towards the end of now, what would, the end of Bo's life. He's
Yeah,
sick.
we're getting 2012 era ish.
2012.
And
Wow.
so that's
It's not that
2011,
long
2012.
ago. Not that long ago.
It's really not, because that's when the second term for Joe being vice president begins.
Right.
And that's when the spot that had been waiting for Bo literally since he was born, that was what they all envisioned. It's quite clear that he wanted Bo to follow in his footsteps. I mean, I went to Archmere Academy, you're going to go to Archmere Academy. I went to University of Pennsylvania, you're going to go to University of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And like clockwork, he followed those exact steps. Hunter went to a different college than Joe did. He went to Georgetown. So Bo was the only one that actually followed his father's footsteps in terms of academia, like for high school and college.
Wow.
And then to take a spot in politics was it was just a perfect cookie cutter Joe. I don't see why he couldn't have been more proud of his son, just for the effort to a father that doesn't seem to deserve this kind of admiration from a son, who seems to be, by all accounts, a pretty decent person with the unfortunate happenstance of having bad
Yeah.
family,
You would think
which you can't help.
You would think that the guy who's willing to lie about who put kids in cages at the border, even though it was his own president who did it, Joe Biden and Barack Obama, would then use this as it's like a real thing. That's why I'm having such a hard time understanding why he's so quiet about it. So then this brings us to like this conclusion with Bo, as far as I know, with what you've been talking about with the death. Has his Bo's death? Do you think about it differently now?
I very much do. I very much do. And this is something, I don't know if you got to see the Danny Jones podcast that recently came out with Dr. Jack Cruz.
No, but I really
And
want to. Shout out
you
Danny
should really
Jones.
watch it.
Yeah, Danny's great, and I really want to watch that episode. So what's the deal? What are you thinking?
Well, in just Dr. Jack Cruz, and I spoke to him. Actually, I got to speak to him on
Awesome.
Twitter and a couple comments, because he talked a lot about so many things. So I'm not going to go over all of it. I don't want to ruin it for anybody. But in particular, of interest to me, was him talking about the fact that he worked at Tulane as a neurosurgeon. That's what he did at Tulane University. And he started his residency right after the United States ended a really secret program that was ran there during the Kennedy era, oddly enough, which was led by a man named Dr. Oshner. There's a book written about this entire scandal, essentially, the CIA program, that the idea behind it was to get these medical students, along with the top of the top, or Dr. Oshner, Dr. Mary Sherman, who they wrote the book Mary's Monkeys, is written after her,
Okay.
and that whole account, and Dr. Judith Vary Baker, who was Leah Harvey Oswald's girlfriend, woman with over 150 IQ, was a child genius by the time she was in high school, able to produce and get rid of cancers in mice faster than any method they'd have ever seen. She was 18, and she was already the most accomplished for like virologist that they had seen, or immunologist.
Right.
So they sent her down there. She ends up dating Lee Harvey Oswald, and they're all working on this project to create in a laboratory a gain of function, if you will, a weaponizable, aerosolized, fast killing cancer. Right, to kill Castro was the idea.
Right,
they were going to spray it over Cuba and kill Castro.
Yeah.
Now the whole thing concluded because Kennedy was murdered, and they had no reason now to kill Kennedy. They have other things to focus on, and the war is going to continue in Vietnam, so they don't care.
Yeah.
And it all kinds of gets swept under the rug, and it was classified anyways for a long time. And all the doctors either were murdered or accidentally died, with the exception of Dr. Judith Vary Baker. I'm actually interviewing her tonight. I've spoken to her before.
Oh, nice.
She's still alive, and
Wow.
she's, I think, in her early 90s.
Whoa.
But she's probably still the smartest person I've ever met. And so I know it's possible. I know her, and when I say smartest person I've ever met, she is a savant.
Right.
It is. She could probably pass a medical exam now, and be she could with nothing and no rest, she could just do it. I'm that certain of how intelligent that woman is. And I believe her. And I believe the program. I know snippets of it. They renamed that program. It didn't just end there, but that particular effort, they say, ended. Now, we don't know to the extent of how far they were accomplishing that. But when you look at politicians that died from cancers, it's one of the highest rates for any like job, like, right, other than working with electrical lines and stuff, like immediate radiation. Politicians rank really high in the list of people that die from cancer,
Hmm.
and particularly glioblastomas. John McCain died from glioblastoma. There's a few like representatives over the years. In the 70s, though, it was really high with heart attacks, but 80s, 90s is seen, and so since now, of course, with John McCain being the more recent one, cancer seems to be the killer. And it always makes you question, did they actually create this, bioweapon that could cause a fast acting cancer that would kill you in a matter of months,
Wow.
which glioblastomas are aggressive and they kill you usually within a few months to a year. Um, and so it makes me wonder.